Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. I think we're off and running. I was a bit frozen up on my end for a second there, guys. Everyone good? Everyone can hear
All
me?
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am well. Everything
don't
good
know.
here.
I don't know whether there's going to be 6 seconds of the start of this episode with me just kind of looking around or not, but we seem to be going. Jeremy Elwood and the Chewmeister, a couple of stand-up comedians in his house with me today. It's good to have you guys on board. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
I think this is the first, pardon the pun, three-way we've done in quite a while.
Hey.
Hey, look at that. He's
But,
away. He's up and running. Yeah.
So good to have you both with me. Everyone well. Chewy, how's the life in Dunedin? What's going on? Anything exciting happening?
Good. Had a good couple of days off. Brilliant weather. Had a major head-on collision right outside my house the other day.
Oh, okay.
That was good.
So not you?
No, not me. No. I live on a road that people think is some sort of hill climb event. And there's been five.
Glenn's got a few of those, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
But there's been 5 crashes outside my house in the last 3 years.
Wow.
And according to the local Facebook group, which of course some real big brains in there, it's because there's on-street parking, and if we could just get rid of that, then no other changes would have to be made.
Oh,
right.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Perfect. So I've been arguing on Facebook today. I'm sure you can tell.
You have to be careful with that. I'd be arguing on Facebook. It does become a pastime. Like I always find that when I start to be a bit of a troll or kind of make points on Facebook and people bite back, it's quite hard to then extricate yourself from the conversation because you're like, some knobby says something at the very end, and you're like, oh, okay, well, it's just, I'm not going to give you any time, Pat. Well, you seem to be spending quite a lot of time talking to me, not giving me any time. So we'll leave it here, shall we? Yeah, no, I'm not going to give you any. It just goes on and on. It's just like sometimes you get to about the 4th comment, and you're like, God, why? Why did I bother? Why?
You've got to have that last comment, though. You can't let it go because that means that they win.
What about you, Jeremy? What's been going on?
Well, kind of the opposite from all of that. Actually, it's been terrible weather up here recently, so I haven't done much today at all. And my Facebook adventure, you'll like this actually, Pat. I got notifications today that people were sending out a ton of ads, Indonesian adverts from the old slightly correct political show Facebook page. So I managed to not actually get into the page, but get into the ad manager and stop that happening. So so that's many years ago. It wasn't costing us anything, don't worry. But there you go. That's been my adventure.
I didn't even know it was still active. We should shut that thing down.
I think it's only active because somebody's been running. I can't read the language, so maybe it was the Indonesian ads running against the sex before marriage ban, and I've just done something horribly bad. Close. Maybe it was their only outlet, and I've just shut the door for them. So I hope not.
Well, I'll say hello and good evening, and thanks for all the messages that people have been sending me for the last kind of 24 hours. Yeah, I'm still, well, actually, I haven't tested myself today. I'm still positive today, but I did have a couple of experiences today that I wanted to share with you. This is the first one. I put this on Twitter, so if you follow me on Twitter, you'll probably already see it. This is not me. This is someone else in the house. The test on the right, as you're looking at it, was done by someone who is feeling particularly rotten at the moment, and it came back basically negative. Now, some people have pointed out they can see the hint of a shadow down there in the positive, like the most hint of the hint could be. But that took a while to come up, and so we took another test on a different, like it's a different brand, and came up positive straight away. And I just wondered, Chewy, how many people would do this after 7 days and go, sweet as, off I go. Because most of New Zealand would look at this and go, yep, I'm good to go. And actually, I just had the ponderance how many people have been taking tests and getting kind of false negatives to then shoot out into the population still being infectious. That was the first thing. The second thing was we actually had to go to the doctors today for the person who was still testing positive in the house because they're feeling pretty rat shit around the whole thing. And the doctor said to them, well, after 7 days, you're good to go, even if you're testing positive. Now, I had not an argument, but I was talking to my sister over the weekend, and she said the same thing. She said, well, after 7 days, whether you're positive or not, you're good to go. I'm like, no, that's not true. Well, that's what my doctor told me. And I'm just like, that's interesting. Kind of thinking maybe the doctor had said that, maybe not. But we got told today by a doctor in Dunedin, literally. Well, you could still be testing positive in 3 months. So after 7 days, you're good to go, even if you're positive. And I was just like, fuck me. We wonder why this thing's going around. Because as we know, the informed of us here in this show, as Dr. Anna Brooks says, if you're still positive in your rat, you're still infectious, because that means you still have COVID in your system that you are breathing out. So I was very surprised to actually get that confirmed, that the medical practitioners are giving their patients the wrong information. Kind of shocked me a bit.
Yeah, I think that's real commonplace as well. People 7 days and I'm good to go seems to be really common.
Yeah, and I've never been quite sure about I'm one of these people who thought I saw that faint line on the test, on that photo you posted, but I've never actually been sure whether there's a correlation between how bright the line is and how much COVID you've got in your system.
I think there is
I think
a correlation.
There is.
Yeah.
I don't, but you see, and my point is that even after we're 3.5 years now, 2.5, coming up 3 years with this virus, there's still a lot of mixed messaging going around. There's still there's certain things have stuck. Some of the catchphrases, if you like, have stuck. 7 days isolation, you're fine after that. But whether they're actually backed up by facts, a lot of us don't actually know. We don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I was fascinated, and for other people who have sent me good wishes, thank you for that. My basic symptoms have been one of exhaustion. I haven't really had the sore throat or that kind. Although I do notice when I do anything, I get exhausted and I sweat. So like at the end of last night's show, I had a hoodie on. That's why I'm wearing basically nothing tonight, just a light t-shirt. Was just had been running a marathon, and I think people already know this. Chewy know this. I've been doing this over the last. This is an old photo now. It's much more advanced than this at the moment. But I've been changing out the timber on my deck, get rid of the 1960 rotten stuff and replacing it. So from one end of the deck to the other end is 12 meters, and I did one piece of wood. Well, it was actually 3 bits of wood, but one strip today. And the first thing I did was lay the wood down and cut it, and then I had to take a break. And then I drilled the holes, I had to take a break, and then I put half the screws in and had to take a break, and then I finished the screws off. So I'm functioning quite well, as in I don't feel really sick, but as soon as I do anything, I'm just like, oh, okay, that's enough. Like I said last night, I go down to the local soccer field and I walk to the end and I walk back and I'm done. That's me done for the dog. So yeah.
When I had it, which is back in June, my symptoms were very, very similar. And I will just give you a heads up that fatigue sticks around for a while.
Yeah.
Without, people seem to be blaming everything on long COVID now, but the fatigue, it really does stick around for a bit. It takes you a while to recover. So, you're doing the right thing. You've just been hydrating, just as I said that, and resting up.
Yeah, we learned today, actually, one of the things at the doctors, we learned today about how important hydration is. And I know everyone's kind of saying that, but actually, person in my house who we went to the doctor for was basically told was dehydrated. And needed to drink more fluids, and so we're going to check again tomorrow, and if that's still a problem, might have to have IV fluids.
IV, right? Yeah.
So I mean, I've been going through about, I think this is 1.5 liters. I've been going through about 3 of these a day, maybe more actually. So yeah, it's extra important, that hydration, if people have got it. Some people in the chat are asking for the dog, so sorry, it's a dog porn shot, had to be in there at some stage, so I just put it up once. So, in all of that saying, being exhausted and taking it easy, as best as we can, I know I'm a little bit scared, Jeremy, because Chewy's here, and me and Chewy find it very difficult to even stick to an hour. Our hour shows average about 90 minutes.
Right.
So, but the good thing is I've got 2 stand-up comics with me, and I could just, actually, and Chewy's got all the management controls of this, so I can just go. And if I get tired, you guys can just finish off the show.
Terrible.
It really is. Yeah. Just you'll wake up tomorrow going, oh well, that was an easy show. I didn't even know you could get broadcasting standards complaints on an online show. Yeah.
All right. Hey, let's get into this, because I want to ask you. And this has been around the world 6 times already. But because you're both stand-ups, I'm going to get rid of the dog, by the way, in more ways than one. Ready? Gone. You're both stand-ups. You both perform in front of audiences doing comedy. And this has been around the world 6 times already, but I want to still throw it at you guys. I kind of saved it to throw at one of you guys. The Elon Musk, Dave Chappell situation. Now I've watched, if you haven't seen the whole thing, you should go try and find it. It's over 5 minutes, and it's the most awkward 5 minutes that there ever is, basically, of Elon walking around stage going like this, and having Dave Chappelle trying to go, why are you all fucking booing? Notice how all the booing is coming from up in the back seats, basically the whole time. I mean, I'm a, you both will know this, I am a huge Dave Chappelle fan. But I have to wonder why the fuck he did this. Let me play 60 seconds of it. This is from the TVNZ feed, so we're not going to get the full gist of it. But if you haven't seen it yet, you're probably living under a rock. But here's a little bit of what went on when Dave Chappelle brought, as he says, the richest man in the world up onto stage.
Make some noise for the richest man in the world. It sounds like some of them people you fired are in the audience.
that was a little bit funny. So look, there you go. We'll leave it at about that. But I'm interested to get your guys' feed on it. You're both stand-ups. I mean, Dave Chappelle did it for a reason. I don't know why. Musk is a tainted brand at the moment. Any of that kind of cool factor he got from making electric cars cool again has completely gone. So I'm not entirely sure of the reason behind bringing him on stage. Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, as much as you might love Dave Chappelle, I mean, one thing he's really good at is getting a headline, and he's done that. And he's loving, he's embracing contrariness at the moment. That's his thing at the moment. He is kind of, I mean, he sort of did the same thing when he hosted Saturday Night Live recently, where he went out and did a big shout out to Kanye. He's kind of going for these sort of, I don't know. Maybe these are his really good mates. Maybe he genuinely is good friends with Kanye and Elon, and that level of fame. Who knows? But to me, there's a huge amount of, well, screw you, world. You can't cancel me. He goes on and on about cancel culture. Meanwhile, he sells out. He's coming to New Zealand next year. That's just been announced in the last 36 hours. Yeah, there's a contrariness. I think he probably knew that was going to be the response. Maybe not quite to the level that it was. But he likes controversy. He enjoys it.
I just think the idea to bring out probably one of the world's most unfunny men onto a comedy show was, oh my God. And my understanding is that show was in, like, whereabouts was it? It was,
I think it was San Francisco. It was in the Silicon Valley area.
Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
So I mean, the dude is so polarizing. There is nobody that has a neutral position on Elon Musk. He's either the savior, he's going to send us all to Mars and he's going to have us all living in a singularity, or he's just a big fuckwit. I think I'm in camp 2 for that one. I would have been booing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. But also, again, I mean, that just goes to my point is Chappelle knows how to get a headline. If he'd done that in LA or New York even, it probably would have got the same response, but it wouldn't quite have the same edge to it as doing it in San Francisco. I mean, literally the only place worse at the moment that you probably could have done that would have been in Ireland, where 80% of the Twitter workforce have been laid off. That's Dublin would probably be in. And Chappelle maybe doesn't have a date there for 6 months and couldn't wait.
Yeah, I mean, it was I don't know. The last time normally when a comedian will bring someone on stage, there's a reason for it, yeah. And Chewy, like you, the most unfunny man in the world. Like, and Dave Chappelle is seems to be a bit of a master at getting people around him and together on stage. Like there was I don't know, it was either him or Chris Rock were doing a gig in London not too long, and all of a sudden there's Chris Rock and there's Dave Chappelle and there's, oh gosh, his name is just jumped out of my head, COVID brain. Got banned from hosting the Oscars.
Ricky Gervais?
No, got banned from it. Anyway, divorced his wife. Acts with The Rock and everything. The Rock and stand-up
Kevin
comedian.
Hart.
Kevin Hart, and all
Kevin
these
Hart,
guys,
right, yeah.
they're all out on stage together, and it was, there was a reason for them to be there, and they talked about the Will Smith slap, and for some reason Kevin Hart had a goat, and it was funny. There was that they entertained the crowd. I guess that's the thing, as people who want to entertain the crowd, what the fuck is that going to do? Is it calculated?
Well, again,
is it what you're saying, Jeremy? Is it calculated?
Oh, absolutely. I think it is.
Yeah,
And I do think it's a calculated fuck you. Chappelle is going out of his way to show, I mean, you watch any of his last 2 or 3 specials, a huge part of what he's writing about is how untouchable he is. That he is, and in many ways, I mean, one of the things he was most famous for was walking away from the Chappelle Show at its height of its popularity, when he was, one of the highest paid people on television, and he walked away from that, and that did give him this untouchability. That gave him this: I'm not, I'm not a slave to the system.
Yeah, you can't buy me.
I'm not working. You can't buy me. That's right. And it's sort of the natural progression of that. Is now you can't buy me. You can't cancel me. I'm going to do the thing that. I'm going to leave people around the world talking about this. I'm going to make you be scratching your heads going, what the fuck is he doing? Well, I'm Chappelle, bitch. I mean, didn't Elon even quote the I'm rich, bitch line from the Chappelle show? And they're just going, oh, dear God.
I saw
watching Elon Musk at the moment, I actually got out punchlined by a small town radio DJ today because he was talking to me about Twitter. I'm doing a show in the Coromandel tomorrow. So Coromandel.
Oh no,
Jason! If you had a friend, I said watching Twitter fall apart was like watching a slow motion car crash, and he just went Tesla crash, and I went, damn it!
Yes, gotcha.
Yeah, he did.
An auto drive Tesla crash. That'd be even better. The safest way of driving a Tesla, apparently, on auto drive. Yeah, I don't know. I think that in fact, people seem to be reveling in the chat here, telling us that he's no longer the richest guy in the world. French fashion guy is now the richest man in the world. Simon says that. David says that as well. Chappelle must consider the private jet nice, though. The other thing, though, with Chappelle is, if you watch his, if you watch his Mark Twain Award when Jon Stewart speaking about $50 million in Comedy Central, there's that. The Jon Stewart line in there is phenomenal about what happened around there. But the other thing that made him untouchable was not only did he walk away from it, was then when he signed with Netflix for 3 specials, they then gave him $60 million.
Yeah.
But he kind of got it all back again. And when you've got then 60, and I remember seeing an interview with Chappelle, and he does this, he mimes the thing where he basically hands them 3 videos. He goes, they want 3 specials, and he went, because he already had them. He'd already done them, and he'd already recorded them. And so they handed him a check, and he handed them 3 specials. And so not only did he have the kind of moral high ground with the walk away from Comedy Central, but then he had the money and the power because he got it all back again from Netflix, 10 years later.
Yeah, and I that's my point, is that what he's proving is that none of this is going to hurt him. It's kind of like what Ricky Gervais does online these days as well. It's that whole thing of, so a bunch of people booed Elon Musk for 6 minutes at a Chappelle show. It's not going to affect Chappelle's ticket sales. It's not going to affect his next special at all. It's kind of like it's like an old Howard Stern prank in a way. In some ways, it's just a prank for the sake of doing a prank.
As comedians, you two stand-ups, many comedians around the world consider Chappelle to be the pinnacle of comedians performing right now. Would you go and see him to check out his craft? Would you go and see him to enjoy him? Will you go and see him? He's in Christchurch, Chewy, and obviously he's in Auckland, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm probably not, and it's got nothing to do with any of the controversy. I, to be honest with you, have been significantly underwhelmed by his last few specials. I think his writing is becoming. I mean, this is just my opinion. I think he's becoming quite self-indulgent, and I think he's flogging a lot of dead horses in some ways. So take all the controversy about it in the same way that. One of the reasons I didn't go, there were actually significant reasons I didn't go see Louis C.K. when he came to Auckland, a month ago. But one of the reasons is I'd read reviews of this current show and they were terrible.
Right.
The reviews were awful. And, at $100 and something a ticket, I can watch a bad show for less than that.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, I was a big fan of Chappelle's show as well, and his
totally.
early specials were incredible writing, great jokes, that sort of thing. And then he's gone off the boil like so many big ticket comedians often do, because they become, I think, disconnected, or they're relying more on a writing team or that sort of thing. I'd
And it
rather
often
see a
doesn't.
comedian on the way up.
It often
at the
doesn't
top.
last too, by the way. I mean, I'm not a big believer in that you get to a certain point, you just can't do it anymore, or because I mean, for example, I've seen Chris Rock 3 times. First time I saw him, he was okay. Second time I saw him, it wasn't very good. But the most recent time when I saw him, it was phenomenal. It was a superb. When I saw him at Spark Arena earlier this year, part of that in New Zealand, interestingly, is when they come here. Often those big international acts will come here very early in their world tour, when they're working material. That it's half finished, and that's just a fact. That's not that's just a fact of the matter. Whereas the most recent time I saw Chris Rock, he was right at the end of his world tour. His show was, it always is, that's the general pattern, is the show becomes the next special. That show was ready to film. I saw Jim Jeffries when I was in Vancouver in October, and it was one of the last dates of his tour. He was filming his special, I think, a week or 2 weeks later in Toronto. The show was superb. I mean, it was slick. It was ready to go.
Yeah.
Whereas if you'd seen that same show in week 1, maybe not.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Run...
I'm looking forward. I like 2 Beers 1 Cave, which is a podcast that I listen to religiously. Tom Segura is coming to New Zealand as well, and he's done 250 gigs this year, and that's the show he's bringing to New Zealand. So you want to have a well worked show. Tom Segura in New Zealand is going to be, it might be his 260th gig of that show when he's in New Zealand. So there's one to look out for.
It's natural. I mean, you brought up Kevin Hart before. I saw an interview with Kevin Hart recently where, when he goes out to try out material, he doesn't do that at clubs, because there's no point. I mean, he can't hear himself speak if he turns up at a club, especially in the US, because people are just yelling and cheering and whatever. So he goes out to try his material and he said this in the interview, in a small, maybe, 2,000 seat venue.
Right.
That's because it's right. That's his open mic night, is playing the Civic in Auckland, or the Regent in Dunedin. That's his tryout gig, because most of his gigs are at Forsyth Bar or Spark Arena, or I mean, actually bigger than that these days would be Western Springs if he was playing an equivalent here. Some of these venues these guys are playing, they're enormous.
What's out of interest, Jeremy? What's the and no disrespect to you, Joe, but I'll ask Jeremy first. If you were doing a comedy tour of New Zealand, what size venues is pretty, like for a Kiwi comedian? What's your average seat theater? Doing the main centers and maybe the one step down sort of towns.
It depends a lot, and it depends a lot on who it is. For me personally, don't answer that question because it makes my agent depressed. But like someone like Ursula Carlson, when she tours, she plays. I guess a sort of ballpark would maybe be about 1,500, 1,800, something like that. I mean, one of the problems for touring comedy in New Zealand is there's a huge gap in the venue market, and this is nationally, this is everywhere. We have a lot of sort of 150 seat theaters, and we have quite a lot of kind of 800-900 up theaters. We don't have, and this actually applies to theater as well. Next time you're talking to Penny Ashton, talk to her about this as well, because we're there's a real gap in that kind of 300 to 500 seat theater market. Because if you think about it, 500 seats is a lot in a smaller town to fill on a regular basis. But interestingly enough, it's the same in the cities too. I mean, Auckland has a bit of a lack of that for for seated theater shows. We have music venues that can have that many people standing comfortably, but a seated between 300 and 500 theater is something that's been missing. We have the Waterfront Theatre, and they specifically aimed for that size.
I wonder if part of that is just to do with the return, the ROI, so to speak. It probably only costs 30% more to have 1,000 seats versus 300 seats, and so you'd rather fill 1,000 because it's a better return on the investment into the actual physical building.
Well, I think a lot of it is that You can probably afford, you can sort of afford to have 1,000-seat venue that you use a couple of times a month, because it can be used for other things. Like take most town halls, are somewhere around the kind of 1 to 2,000 seat, depending on whether you're open the balcony. But you can use them for other things. You can use a 1,000-seat venue for a university graduation, for example,
Yeah.
or a large corporate event or something like that. A 300-seater is kind of weird for that, especially if it's actually
Yeah.
seated like a theater. You can't use that for much else.
Yeah. No, I saw Russell Howard in the town hall here in Dunedin, so that was
Yeah,
what
there
he
you
used
go.
for. Joey, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's bang on the money. That venue issue is obviously not just comedy. It's
No, of course.
musicians and
Mm.
theatre troupes, and here in Dunedin, the argument of the multi-use venue that they've been trying to work out what the hell they're doing has been bubbling away, where they can't decide. If we go too big, we've already got the Regent and we've got the town hall, and then we've got small ones, we've got pubs and clubs and that sort of thing, but nothing in that middle, or something that can be multi-use. And I think that's something a lot of places struggle with. Talking about like touring comedians and that sort of thing, that makes it really hard to tour as well. You're either a big name that can fill something like the Regent, or New Zealand's a long way away from anywhere else, so I'll pass on that one. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's I mean, and for local comedians as well, it's fantastic to tour, and if you can, if you sell 100 seats everywhere, that's great. But it's that next step up. That next step is a big one. Moving from 100-seater to an 800-seater. That's a hell of a lot more tickets.
Well, even thinking about the touring comedians as well as an opportunity for the locals as well. If you're on warm up duty for someone, that can open a whole bunch of doors.
Yeah, totally.
I feel like, Jeremy, that this is maybe a bit of a warm-up conversation for a certain new podcast that's starting next year that I haven't released publicly yet.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Before we get off this, and this is why we can't truncate shows, because we're at 10:30 and we haven't started the first story properly yet. But out of interest, Jeremy, I don't need to know names. We don't need to know names. But are there any comedians, New Zealand comedians, who their only income comes from their live comedy in New Zealand at the moment, or do they all have to supplement with other stuff?
No, I would definitely say that. I mean, in many ways, I make my living from live comedy. Now, where I do that live comedy, if that's what you're talking about, I do some of that in corporate environments and things like that. Yes, yeah, there would be. Not in the same way that you're thinking necessarily. That I mean, there are more comics in the US who make their living from touring than the three of us could name between us. I mean, there is a huge touring circuit there, and now some of those gigs are shit. But you can make a living. I mean, you can do 365 gigs a year if you want. You could gig every night if you had the stamina to do that. And we're willing to go with the rough and the smooth. We obviously don't have that in New Zealand. But yeah, I mean, there are certainly people. There are certainly New Zealand comedians who make their living doing live performance. Maybe not all of it in New Zealand, but there are those who do as well. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hey, should we look at some news stories?
That was based on a news story. Yeah.
This is not even really necessarily a news story. It sort of is, but I don't really want to talk about the news angle to it whatsoever. I want to talk about karakia or not karakia. First of all, the story to bounce off into the conversation is around the Kaiparamia. Originally was going to ban having a karakia at the start of the meeting. Let me play you a little bit of the actual conversation. There is a councillor who was going to start with a karakia that he stopped. You're going to hear a bit from the councillor, and then you're actually going to see a little bit. It's quite bad audio and video. I apologize for that. From the mayor actually stopping it, they show you what went on in there. And then I'll skip forward a little bit, and you'll see some of the response to the hikui. They talk about it being a peaceful hikui. When you listen to how the people are speaking about why they were doing a hikui, I'm not saying it was violent, but the language is, shall we say, aggressive as to why they're going to do it. But let's have a bit of a listen as to the person who was wanting to do a hikoi, and what happened?
On the 30th of November, I was repeatedly denied the ability to say the karakia, which was really disappointing, and it was quite humiliating as well.
This is a council which is full of people who are non-religious, religious, of different ethnicities, and I intend to run a secular council here which respects everybody, and I will not be veering from that. Thank you. Now, do we have a...
I don't agree with that.
Sorry, you cannot interject. Can I have apologies, please?
Excuse me, for those that do practice...
Councillor Kiora, you are not allowed to speak in this manner.
This does represent broader issues, and I think that that's why the hikoi is still going ahead. There were campaign sentiments, during the campaign. There were terms that were bandied about. There was anti-Māori ward sentiments. There was anti-co-governance sentiments. So there are broader and more substantial issues at play here.
So we'll leave that there. Now I'll go forward to the TVNZ Breakfast Show talking to the hikoi. We won't play the whole lot of that, but you'll get a bit of a gist as to the anger that there is around this decision. And so this is the conversation between the host and the leader of the hikoi.
About? Well, it's really quite simple. The purpose of today's hikoi is to inform all racists in this country that the doctrine of discovery is over. We will no longer tolerate ignorance or arrogance. That's the purpose of today. And if he doesn't get that message, step down.
The mayor said that he had
Jenny May
a
Coffin
conversation.
is like, how do we go through this? You can hear it in her voice.
And
but
has since then, as I said
there's
in our
passion
introduction, stepped back from that initial decision and said that everyone would have a turn with however they wanted to start council meetings from this point on. Why isn't that response good enough?
Of course it's not good enough. Is that his compromise, is it? He's got to know that he's a councillor because he was voted in. We have our rights as inherited from Tupuna. That's why we're here. How dare someone who's been voted in for 3 miserable years think that he can do whatever he likes without tikanga, without conversation first. Just apply it? Well, that don't work anymore.
There you go. That gives you kind of the gist of what we're going to say. I've got another clip here, which is the mayor himself talking about who he is and what he values, which we could get to in a bit. But Chewy, I can already see you in the chat talking to people about it. So if you'd like to share your thoughts, because there's two angles, right? There's what's going on in Kaipara, but we have this idea, and it's an American idea, but most democracies seem to use this thing about the separation of church and state. So my question is a part of the broader conversation as well, is karakia as a prayer. Is it appropriate to start with the separation of church and state with a prayer? Or does the concept of the cultural aspect to it in New Zealand supersede the quote unquote prayer that it is because it's a part of our culture? And how does that fit into any sort of local or central government conversation? But Chewy, you're looking ready to go. So what are your thoughts?
So first of all, she needs to be the spokesperson of literally everything. I think if there's a news story that if we're looking for comment, we cross to her wherever she is. That's really important.
I swear to you, I would love to hear her opinions on Dave Chappelle introducing Elon Musk. I would just be, I'd be waiting for that. It'd be phenomenal.
I would literally follow her anywhere. I think the thing with the whole karakia thing, and look, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a close analogy that it's a prayer, but it's not necessarily a religious prayer.
Right.
It's more of a focusing and an acknowledgement of the work that's about to be done, and just, I guess you could loosely say it's spiritual. But he said this, he's got a big reaction, and then he's kind of half stepping it in a way that only a really average white councillor would do, and go, okay, no, I was wrong there. Everybody's going to have a turn. Hey, that's pretty good. It's not everyone. If we're talking about New Zealand, we're talking about two peoples who signed a treaty. That's what that's about. Where is the harm in a 1 minute karakia at the start of a meeting? It literally, it should not matter.
Before we jump to you, Jeremy, let's play a little bit of from the mayor talking to New Zealand Herald about who he is, because it's one of these really, shall we say, ironic situations where, much like you hear, and I've talked about lots of times on the show, that the ACT Party seem to only want equality when it comes to areas of race. Any other equality, inequality they don't care about, any other protected class within human rights. But when it comes to race, they must have equality. It seems that the mayor is talking to New Zealand Herald a bit about what he's about and who he's about. And the only thing he seems to bring up when it comes to us all coming together are issues of race. And I do think it's perhaps indicative of maybe as we already kind of know, but I'm spelling it out, that maybe the complaint around the karakia has less to do with the prayer aspect and more to do with the Māori aspect.
Lived in karakia for
100%.
20 years. We all got on. We all worked hard, played hard. Wasn't an issue where you came from, what your race was, whatever. I think those days.
See, notice he didn't say what he didn't say what your socioeconomic status was. He didn't say what it was. The only thing that mattered didn't matter what race you were. This is the point about these people who want to sell themselves as we want the same for everything, but the only thing they come back to is wanting to equalize seems to be issues of race.
If people are trading for them again, we all need to get on. We all need to be able to work together and get on like we always did. It's still sinking in somewhat. I had a very strong vote for me. So I feel a deep responsibility to the district. Moving forward, we need to be able to handle a lot of major issues that are coming upon us from central government with co-governance, with Three Waters, changes to the RMA. I'm concerned that a lot of people in our district struggle with running their businesses. They're worried about the costs that are being incurred. We have a very threatening world economic situation coming upon us. So money is going to be a very important subject for the district in the next 3 years.
So there you go. Anti-co-governance, anti-Three Waters, anti, any kind of racial disparity, pro-business. That's who he is. Jeremy, you haven't had a chance yet.
Well, I mean, I don't really need one. Chewy nailed it, and so did you actually when you said that this isn't about a prayer at the beginning. This isn't about church and state. This is so often. It's about culture. It's about other. It's about difference. And it's a. You asked the question, does the cultural significance of the karakia override the fact that it's a prayer? I think yes. I think it does. I think it's I mean, there are people who do. I've been at events and conferences where people have gone out of their way to commission a specifically non-religious karakia for the opening of an event, and it's doable, but it doesn't have to be done. Because it's not much different from the fact that any 12-step program will open a meeting with the Serenity Prayer, which is from the Bible, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a group of people who are talking about God for the rest of however long that lasts. Because I'm a staunch atheist, but if a council meeting, I don't know, it's kind of interesting, if a councillor decide, if this guy had decided he wanted to open every meeting with the Lord's Prayer, I probably would have a bit of an issue with that. But the karakia is, it's a tradition, and I'm absolutely no expert in tikanga, but even I just know that, as Chewy said, we're a nation of two peoples who signed a treaty, and that's a right. That's a right.
I think that's always the point to come back to, right? And we talk about a multicultural country, when we talk about all those things, we have to remember that the country is founded on a bicultural contract, right, between two peoples. Yes, we live in a multicultural country, but it was founded in its modern incarnation on a bicultural agreement. And I think I'm going to say it again, not to beat a dead horse, is that when anybody says we want equality, but the only fucking area they cite for needing equality is an area of race, then that's an issue, right? That's an issue. And you see it over and over again through ACT policy, and you're seeing it here. Notice the things that he pulled out. I mean, fair call. He pulled out the RMA. But
let's not pull any punches, Pat. What you're saying, and you're absolutely right, but let's say it out loud. When white people say the only equality we need to worry about is race, that's the problem. You know, when white people are saying we've all got to come together as one race, it's because 9 times out of 10 they think that those cocky Maoris are getting too much, or that's where you get these ridiculous, pointless, the ridiculous arguments against Three Waters, that it's handing water over to whoever, and this, and yeah.
I found his little porchside chat quite illuminating. He's just talking about the good old days when we all used to work hard and play hard, and the subtext there is back when we either didn't listen to Māori at all, or they knew their place enough not to even speak up. I think that's really the good old days that he's talking about.
It's the New Zealand version of Make America Great Again, isn't it? It's just like,
absolutely.
What are the great days that you're talking about? Let's take us back to the 1950s. Well, hate to break it to you, but they weren't great for everybody.
Yeah. And look, if you speak to it, and I can't speak on behalf of, but having done this enough in radio and in talkback in particular, when you hear people say things like, oh, how it used to be was so much better, we all got on so much, then you speak to a minority who was around at that time, who then phones up and goes, actually, I wasn't allowed to speak my language at school. I got strapped for it. All these things that were really bad. They thought it was really good because they had the upper hand. So of course it felt good to them, but they had the upper hand. And now that perhaps there's a little bit of quid pro quo coming to, they don't like it. And I'm
I do love the fact that almost every time that you interview a local councillor on an issue like that, they do look like they could be a character out of Little Britain or something. They just sitting on his deck with the massive view behind him with his champagne and his work shorts. There you go. This guy. It's like, yeah, good idea.
I guarantee you,
Central Casting.
I guarantee you, his election campaign would have been something that I love in local councillor. It'll just be a picture of him doing a thumbs up and him going, I'm going to change this place.
Yep. Well, he's
something really vague.
He's not even going to change it, right? So it's just like concrete change for the Kaipara.
It'll be like, who's got one thumb and hates Three Waters? This guy.
My understanding as well is his wife there in the picture has said some very interesting things on social media.
It's a very culturally diverse group that he's got there gathered in his batch. Not sure if you've ever been to the Kaipara, but not all of it looks like that.
Well, I know where he is. He's in Mangawhai Heads, which I spent 30 years from 8 through to my adulthood going to holiday. And right now it is Auckland's, actually it's probably wealthy Auckland's northernmost suburb. So it does look like that now. It certainly didn't look like that in the 1980s when my parents bought a batch on the water for something like $40,000. But yes, that's probably quite representative of a cliff-top Mangawhai Heads house, completely and utterly.
Yeah. Well, just think about that, Pat. You're from the district. You could go back and run for mayor.
I could, or I could stay in Dunedin and be happy. Oh no, I'm isolating, Jeremy. I'm sorry, I can't do that because I'm isolating, so I'm not allowed to. I can't go beyond my neighbourhood. So
fair call.
All right, hey, let's have a look at this other thing, guys. This is really maybe just there's actually, you hear about them opening up the books, and I think about opening up the books in government, and it always seems to be okay. Here comes the flood of sort of complaints and pardon me, and attacks from opposition because that's sort of their job, and it's kind of been a bit, because it's almost a little bit like not too much to report. Because can you criticize the government for putting the tax back on the fuel? Because if you're going to criticize them for that, does that mean when you get into government you're going to take them off? So it's let's play the story and have a look at some of the headlines, and then we'll have a bit of a chat about before we wrap up. Here we go.
The government has given us a month's reprieve before bringing back the pain at the pump. It's extended its fuel tax cut for a month. After that, it will begin phasing back in the 25-cent tax, but it won't be back up to full price until the end of March. Half-price public transport has been extended through to the end of March as well. But diesel drivers, sorry, you miss out on the extension. Road user charge discounts end at the end of January, as previously signalled. The move was announced as the government books were opened, with Treasury joining the Reserve Bank's recession predictions, though the Finance Minister is characterising it as a speed bump. Here's political editor Jenna Lynch.
Weaning us off the fuel discount fad diet.
It is not sustainable to continue to subsidise the cost of petrol indefinitely for everyone.
The fuel tax cut will remain in place until February the 28th, then bam, 12.5 cents back on. And come the end of March, the remaining 12.5 cents will be stacked on top.
Not good, no. It's not good because the price of fuel is already really high.
Like it's not high enough already. Too high, yeah. That's tough for most, I would think, yeah.
I'm not going to argue with the politicians about it. I mean, no, good luck to them. I don't give a damn, really.
Well, this seems like a surprising choice, I guess. It's still pretty expensive, right?
Because it's extremely expensive and it's time to stop spending. We're heading for a recession.
A challenging year.
As the thing decides to freeze.
Lies ahead.
It's expected to be short and shallow, a 0.8% contraction in 2023 and the flow on a peak of 5.5% unemployment in 2024. Grant Robertson's labelling it a speed bump.
He can call it whatever he wants. The bottom line is he's been abysmal as a finance minister for New Zealand. His record will not be a good one. He's had 5 years of missing his numbers. I suspect he'll do exactly the same in his sixth and hopefully his final.
Ouch. Robertson defining the goals for his sixth budget today, laser focused on the cost of living crisis and, quote, getting the basics right.
Is that an admission your government has been frivolous?
Absolutely not. What that is a commitment to make sure that we invest in health and housing and education.
Yeah, well, I think it would be quite nice to have got the basics right over the last 5 years.
The instruction to ministers and departments alike is clear. If you want shiny new things, find your own cuts to fund them.
Budget 2023 is going to be a challenging budget to put together. The level of funding that we have available to be able to spend means our focus must be on those core areas.
But though the belt is tightened, the budget spend up still reasonably significant, $4.5 billion.
Is that basically your election bribe kitty?
It is an allowance that is going to have to deal with significant cost pressures across every part of the government's expenditure.
The cost of living crisis clearly hitting the government's pocketbook too. So, according to Grant Robertson, the traditional election year money scramble is off. We'll see.
Right, and then just
I don't like her tone.
Yeah, that was a very interesting we'll see at the end, wasn't it? So other things that weren't really mentioned so much in that, Treasury is forecasting house prices won't recover until 2025. Will take a further year until the values then return to their peak at 2021. In the meantime, house prices are predicted to fall by a further 15% between September 2022 and December 2024. Some mixed news for homeowners. While household incomes are growing strongly and are broadly keeping pace with inflation, the pressure will start to build as high interest rates push house prices down and mortgages roll over, according to Treasury. Inflation and unemployment had a high of 5.5%. Treasury believes inflation is near its peak at 7%. Its forecasts show it won't be until the end of 2024 when the annual CPI inflation figure returns to between 1% and 3%. Reserve Bank, until then, is expected annual CPI inflation to be around 6.4% in 2023. Concurrently, wages are estimated to increase by 6.8%, and there is a 0.8% recession on the way, so they're saying. So, lots to talk about there. I guess the first thing, especially looking at, this is Treasury, right? But the Reserve Bank got the predictions of the unemployment figure so badly wrong. That's one of the reasons our inflation's so high at the moment. Making decisions based on these projections and stuff, I'm less trusting than I used to be as to what's going to go on. I saw house prices dropping by 40%, and I'm just like, what? Like, no. I don't know how much. I'm not the expert, but I don't trust these numbers as much as perhaps I would have done 5 years ago, because the markets have been so volatile, the economies have been so volatile around the world, that no one seems to have got it right so far. Why is this right?
I think I think you've got a point. I think we are forgetting the fact that prior to the last 4 or 5 years, prior to COVID and some of the economic insecurity before that, we actually went through historically a remarkably settled period in global markets. It was a remarkably settled period. There wasn't a world war. There wasn't a stock market crash. So we kind of got used to Treasury's predictions, forecasts being reasonably accurate, because they weren't taking any big gambles on them. They were basically saying, well, it's been steady as she goes, and that's how it's going to ride. Then the world got hit with a couple of real left hooks, and as a result, markets have done what they've done. They've gone a little haywire. So yeah, we are living through very uncertain times, and I think that's why. I mean, even in that report, and obviously those are very short bites from Christopher Luxon, but you're really not seeing any specific things being pulled out of this opening of the books that are the problem. Once again, you and I have talked about this so many times, but the opposition are simply opposing. They're simply saying he's been a terrible finance minister. They're not saying why. They're not pointing at those things, because they know as well as exactly. They can't, and they also know as well as anybody else in Parliament that Grant Robertson's guess is as good as anybody's at the moment. We don't know what's around the corner. House prices always cracks me up a little bit. This idea that house prices is a phenomenal indicator of how the world's going. Here's a news flash to you: if house prices fall, your house is worth less, but so is the one you want to buy.
Yeah.
So
I was thinking as I was watching that, though, I guess, even though I sit firmly on the left and it's not my world to vote for National in general, I am looking forward to them getting in next year and solving every single problem that New Zealand has. I mean, can you just imagine the world we're going to live in with Christopher Luxon as our Prime Minister, and how there'll be no problems? Everything will be solved, and there'll be no issues in New Zealand whatsoever. I mean, that in and of itself is almost worth a vote, isn't it?
With David Seymour as his deputy prime minister as well. That solves the treaty right there. That's there'll be no karakias, but everyone's going to get along just like we did in the good old days.
I mean, there's one thing that I want to talk about is the axing of the half price public transport thing. And like this has been something that's helped a lot of people out through all of this fuel cost rises and that sort of thing. And for me, it's just shone off a light on the fact of, like, we know that the public transport doesn't turn a profit. So why don't we just make it free anyway? Have either of you guys seen how much it would cost to fund free public transport in New Zealand?
No,
off the top of my head, no.
No, I saw something that was something like 200 million per year. And that to me seems to be a pretty good, like, that would be worth it.
Pretty good investment.
I would improve that if the numbers that I saw were correct. But
it's funny. Sorry, Trey.
No, you go.
Well, no, I'm going to agree. I don't use public transport all that often, mainly because working nights it doesn't work for me. Auckland's public transport is very slowly improving, but it's still not great if you work outside of peak hours. But one night that I absolutely used it was Saturday night when I went to Guns N' Roses at Eden Park. And I used a ferry to get there to the train station. I got a train. I got a train back from the stadium. I got a bus home. And with the exception of the ferry, it was all free. Because they do that for big events up here. If you've got a ticket to a big concert, that includes your public transport. And I tell you what, those trains were packed. That took God knows how many cars off the street that night. And you know, with Eden Park, that's an absolute necessity because you just cannot park there. You know, it's why Eden Park is so much better for concerts than Mount Smart Stadium up here, because Mount Smart is just miles. Nobody lives anywhere near Mount Smart. Eden
Yeah,
Park's great, but
we
you
used to do
take
that
those
for the
trains
rugby.
out, it would be a nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Sorry?
used to do that for the rugby. We'd park in New Lynn, jump on the,
Yep.
because you had your Auckland rugby ticket, you'd show them and the thing, and
Yep.
you'd go to the games, get off at Kingsland, which is right by Eden Park, and walk
And
across it,
funnily-
and you walk in.
Funnily, that Saturday night, so they had Guns N' Roses, which is exactly what I did, Pat. Got the train to Kingsland, but I got on in Britomart. But at the same time, the same night, they had Christmas in the Park at the Domain, which was,
Oh, yeah.
you know, they were expecting 250,000 people. The weather was just appalling, so I've no idea how many people actually went, but it was a big number, put it that way. But they had a different train line. You know, you took the Swanson train to get to Kingsland, or you took the Onehunga train to get to Newmarket, even though, you know, those two stations geographically aren't very far apart.
Mm.
And I mean, it seemed to work seamlessly, and it was free.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
what a
that's
great
cool.
way to move a hell of a lot of people really, really
Oh.
quickly.
Yeah, and I'm very spoiled. I mean, I spent all of October in Vancouver, which has a phenomenal public transport system. Just, you know, it was, I used it. That's all I used. You know, I think I took 2 Ubers in the 3 weeks I was there, and you know that was because it was 3 o'clock in the morning and I had to get somewhere really out of the way. But the rest of the time, public transport, day and day night, and it really reminded me of what a good, solid public transport system looks like.
Let's just show you. And I know it's from you. You started this at the last story, but let's just quickly put up. This was a comment from the conversation sitting around the mayor, talking about what a karakia is. It's a ritual. Let's not pretend council doesn't adhere to other rituals. Old dude is literally sitting there covered in chains. From Ava. So thank you for that. And I think we are pretty much done. If me and Chewy do under an hour, then it is the world's shortest show.
There'll be
far as
people
we're
turning
concerned.
up shortly, just going, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm late, and we're not going to be
Gotta
here,"
catch
and they're going
the
to be
last
really
half an hour.
confused.
Yeah, this
And,
is what this is what reruns are for. This is what
our-
repeats are in.
Our only downside is normally when we start to say it's time to wrap up, Jeremy, with me and Chewy, we're still here in 20 minutes figuring out how to wrap up. So,
Well,
I
I'll
think
say
we
good
might-
night. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks for joining us tonight, team. We really enjoy you being with us. Remember that next Monday night is the last show of the year, but we're not planning on doing like a newsy type show. George is working, but he's going to try and phone in. And me and Chewy will be here. And Jeremy, if you want to jump in, you can jump in. Just as it's basically a sign off for the year and wishing everyone a sort of Merry Christmas. This weekend, there's going to be a meetup. We're not sure whether the meetup is going to be during our Dunedin-based Christmas party, depending on how we're feeling with COVID and if the deck gets finished, or whether we have it on Sunday morning. But if you'd like to join the virtual meetup, the only way you can do it is to be a patron. If you want to be a patron, then head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. There are 7 layers, speaking of Elon Musk, including the FUEL, the fuck you Elon level, which is only $8 a month, and we give you 2 blue check marks for that, not just one, like Elon practiced for a while. So if you want to be a part of the team, and that way, patreon.com/Big Hairy News, and then you'll get to join in this weekend's either Christmas party, if we have it, Chewy, or I'll do a general meetup on the Sunday morning, like we've done the last few months, just to say good day and wrap up the year with you fabulous people as well. Anything else you want to share us with as we have to wrap up the show, guys?
No, not really. I've got my wrapping up my year in bits and pieces this week too. So if anyone's watching me from the Coromandel, come and see me in Whitianga tomorrow night. That's about
Yeah,
it.
what are you doing? You actually cut out when you were talking about the radio station tomorrow in Coromandel. What are you doing there?
Oh, I'm doing a gig, a place called the Monkey House Theatre in Whitianga. It'll be my last comedy show for the year. So yeah, it's me and a small lineup of up and coming Auckland acts. And I was meant to be flying, but I got notice today that Whitianga Airport, the runway is closed because of the weather. But you know, bless them for giving you 24 hours notice to change your plans. So
yeah,
so I'll be driving over, but that'll be pleasant in itself.
That's a pretty good gig, eh? Get yourself across here, what, in a helicopter or a little Cessna from what, Whenuapai to Coromandel or something?
No, they do. It's great. It's a great barrier air fly Auckland Airport. It's like a 25-minute flight, but yeah, they fly to Whitianga. Yeah.
Very good.
I didn't
Very
book
good.
it. You know, I have people for this.
Yeah, people, my people, you and Dave
You've sold
Chappelle.
out. You've changed.
That's right. Yeah, I'm going to bring out. That's what I'm going to do. Actually, my next show, I'm going to bring out. Please welcome Whitianga's richest man.
There'll be a lot of them in Whitianga.
Yeah,
You'll have ones to pick
yeah.
from. Kooky wants to know how the weather's going to be for the barbecue on Saturday. Don't know. I guess we'll figure out. Chris has just joined us. Oh, there you go. Chris has just joined us. I was looking average. Thanks, Chris, for catching the end.
We might get away with it.
JN has said always interesting. Look, let me tell you one thing. The one thing that people ask me about when people are talking about Dunedin weather, everyone knows that it's cooler. It's cooler, but it's not necessarily it's cooler. It's that the variants are so massive. You can have a 30 temperature day on one day in summer, and it can be 11 the next day. And the other thing is the weather forecast. Anything more than almost about 12 hours out is often wrong. So we'll see.
All right,
guys. Hey, thank you, Jeremy. Thank you,
No
Chewy.
problem.
Good to have you with us. Fun to be here. I guess Chewy will probably see you tomorrow night. So that's the night you were booked in for. You just thought you'd jump in early as well.
I don't pay attention to things.
Other than that, thank you for joining us, everybody. And we will see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Hooroo.